Welcome to the She Build Show. I'm your host, Stefanie Olson, a licensed general contractor who builds new construction, renovates, and designs your vision. Today, more than ever, we need raw, authentic women who are willing to rise above society's norms, break those glass ceilings, and encourage each other to boldly build the life we were meant to live. So, honey, what are you building? Today on the She Build Show, we have an incredible guest down from Malibu, California, Colleen Brennan. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, like I was saying earlier, I'm just a little out of it. flying in from taking the red eye from Malibu to Chicago, visiting my family.
Oh my goodness. My husband always tries to get me to take red eyes, and I'm like, no way. I need to sleep way too much.
Trust me, I pass out. And that's the one time I can pass out and then wake up and I'm like, where am I?
Yeah, that's perfect. Okay, yeah. So tell us what the name of your company is and like where you're from.
So I'm from Chicago originally. The name of my company is Bad Bitch Builders. And when I was about 22 years old, I started a company that was fully all female employed run by me. And it was an architectural restoration company. So we worked on Frank Lloyd Wright houses, we worked on Wrigley buildings, we worked on Chicago World Fair buildings, Victorian houses out here. And it was really eye-opening seeing the biggest thing for me about construction and why it is so important was the physical healing I saw happen in these women. I am 13 years sober, and it has done something to my body physically, where my body physically has a different brain than my mind. And we react, and we have that, fight or flight going on, or stress, or cortisol levels, or, whatever it is. I think a lot of people throughout their day don't realize or are mindful of what is going on with their body. Mm-hmm. And what I saw happen with these women were some of these women who had eating disorders or were sexual abuse victims or had physical abuse or were just hyper aware and sensitive all the time. All of a sudden, just through the physical actions of demolition, of framing, of, being super intricate and detailed with dexterity on like just the side of a building, whether it's even caulking. It was this frontal focus that all of a sudden these women could look people in the eye. They moved slower. Their shoulders were back. They functioned better. They ate better. It was eye-opening. And I keep trying to Google every now and then, does trade work help with PTSD? There's no articles I can find, but it is. I imagine it's the same thing with people who are dancers or yoga instructors or breathwork healers or just masseuse. I don't know. People who have a kinesthetic occupation, I think get it. And construction is definitely one of them. So
that's awesome. I think that's just any sort of like physical movement is healing, right? Like, just kind of gets you out of your mind and gets you into your body.
Yeah.
So Bad Bitch Builders, that's pretty cool. So you tell me like a little bit of what the business is now. What does it look like now? And then we'll kind of walk backwards.
So I work on a crew now of 20 guys, and I work for an entirely different company. And all the women that I employed are still employed with other construction companies. So there's the company is down to one person, me. The reason being, I drove down Canaan. It's this road in Malibu it cuts through the canyons, and I was probably 12 years sober by then. No, 10 years, because it was 4 years ago. And I have this white light spiritual experience that says you need to be here. You need to show other women out here what it is you do. And I don't know. I've never done something impulsive like that in my sobriety. Um, I usually always have to double check with my sponsor, like, okay, my first thought's usually the wrong thought, But it was such a weird voice and intuition that I went with it, and I moved my entire life in a week.
Wow.
And yeah, right. By the time I paid everybody off and I paid for all my stuff moving, I was like, maybe $100 to my name.
Oh my goodness.
What did I just do? And until that first year was one of my hardest years, but one of the most amazing years of my life. And I ended up living in an apartment right on the ocean. And what happened is there was this thing called the Woolsey fire, and it was one of the largest brush fires that has ever been recorded in history in Southern California, and it decimated Malibu. And people usually get this idea that Malibu is this, you know, celebrity, posh, like just stereotypical, people with their noses up in the air.
Right. Yeah.
But it's like cowboys. It's rednecks. It's these people who left LA that wanted nothing but just to be in rural areas in California. And then came the celebrities, and then came the people that wanted to follow that. So it's a mixture of everything. Uh, and the locals are the ones who I love. They're the cowboys, the rednecks, the craftsmen, the surfers, the people. The place in Malibu I found out is that the land there, if you're there for the right reasons, you will flourish. If you're there for the wrong reasons, that place will chew you up and eat you out, to spit you out. Like it's just one of those um, principles, and I've seen happen over and over and over again. But so on this crew with 20 men, in the past 2 years, we have remodeled and rebuilt over 6 homes. And what I love doing on the side is I harden homes. So with what that means, it's a newer field, kind of in construction and in the fire world, and it has to do with brush clearance. It has to do with installing different soffits for embers that because it's not the 100-foot wall of fire that's going to burn your home. It's the embers that smolder and cook, like in places underneath your deck or in the soffits right under your eaves. It's stuff that are super simple to fix if you just took the time to do it. Certain trees like sumac and some eucalyptus, palm trees are like a death sentence.
Right.
Every time I see a palm tree, I'm like, that's an asshole. They're not meant to be in LA. They're
right. I agree. I always I don't know why I just hate palm trees here. I'm like, they only belong in Hawaii. And my neighbor has 20, and I'm like, bleh. I live in agriculture. I live up in Durham, and it's like orchards, and I'm like, why are there palm trees? Like they don't belong.
Anyways, they're growing in Durham.
I know. I don't know. They always look terrible. They don't look pretty. Okay, so you really are right now. You're just you're on a crew and kind of working as a subcontractor for various general contractors in the area, doing some pretty extensive remodels. I imagine if you did 6, they're probably pretty big and pretty large projects. And so what do you think your favorite skill is? Because I know you have a lot of them in terms of construction. I know you do welding as well. So what's your favorite, trade?
Taking MIG welding for sure. And I love framing. I absolutely love doing a rough framing on a house. I love it all, frankly. I'm being a redhead in California, roofing isn't the most physically great feeling. And I feel like dying being fully Irish, but roofing is so fun. Doing rebar and concrete. But I would definitely say demolition, welding, carpentry, hands down.
Awesome.
I love finish carpentry too. That's a whole different language. rich than rough
It
carpentry.
is.
Yeah.
Such an
And
attention to detail.
yes,
So how did you learn? How did you learn?
it's a great question. I've always been artistic, right? And as a kid, we weren't exposed to trade school, so it's a huge thing I want to look at doing down the line in my life. I have terrible ADD, right? And so what only allowed me to focus was taking apart my bike and putting it back together, taking apart, I don't know, a light bulb and looking at how it's built. Like I was that kind of kid. I wasn't playing with Barbies. I was playing with Lincoln Logs. I was like, I don't know, for the younger people might not know what Lincoln Logs are.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah, the hands-on things.
And definitely. And I went to New Trier High School in Winnetka, Illinois, and I got into film photography. Absolutely loved it, and it allotted me a scholarship at Denver University to go for fine arts. Had a terrible art teacher. I was in the throes of my addiction, dying, going to AA meetings here and there, trying to get sober. And I got licensed as a TIG and MIG welder out in Colorado. And I started doing carpentry in Colorado. And that was the one thing that kind of was my happy place. I'd wake up from a night out, not knowing what happened. And the only thing that would get me out of bed was that. Flash forward, I go to Chicago, second year in college. I go for Thanksgiving, and there's a party going on at our house, and there's alcohol. I woke up from a huge Irish Catholic family, and next thing I know, I'm waking up 2 weeks later out of a coma, and I had a really, really bad DUI. Drove a car through the house when I had a medicine, and was ejected from the sunroof. I landed on my neck on the dining room table. I broke every single one of my fingers. I broke my neck. I broke my collarbones. I broke all my ribs. I had the occipital lobe was hit so hard I didn't have vision, and I couldn't move my legs. And I still have like a piece of glass looking itself out of my room 13 years later.
Oh
And
my gosh.
right, so I woke up from that coma, that induced coma, and had this white light moment. I've only had two now, and it said, "You will stay sober the rest of your life, but it will be the hardest thing you do. I have never left you alone. I love you, and you are going to help so many people." And it was the most warm, incredible feeling I've ever had. And because I couldn't see, I could feel the heat of the blinds on my face, and it was December in Chicago, December 5th of 2009. And about a year later, I started picking up carpentry again. And then I got hired again. And then I got my general contractor's license. And then I started that company. And because I was sober, I had a head start above everybody that's my age. I had these experiences from people in the meetings that were carpenters, that were electricians, that were tradesmen, that were business people, that were lawyers, that were all these things that I could pick from and have help from that taught me so much. Frankly, my teachers were those crazy drunks, and to give back, I would hire one.
Yeah.
That saved my life. Oh my God, it saved my life. And so, flash forward, I have now picked up. I mean, Malibu is like it went back to the 1950s, where women are stuck in the kitchen, or like the women aren't helping the situation either. They're on the Instagram doing the selfie, and I'm all about it too. Whatever you got to do. I love me a good picture and everything, whatever. When I'm 90, I'm gonna look back and be like, oh, look at that.
Yeah, right.
But at the same time, I think with social media and with that culture out there, it's so much about this physical exterior appearance. And I'm sorry going off on a tangent, but there's something there that I want to have a few years still working on a crew just as a tradesman, just
Yeah.
to get my bearings. And I've created a really good reputation for myself, because your reputation in construction is everything.
Absolutely.
Everything,
Absolutely.
right?
I was just telling that to one of my employees that, you know, there was a particular client that was being difficult, and she's like, well, we could just refund them and tell them like, no, thank you. And I was like, yeah. And then what about what they say to other people? Like, even sometimes it's difficult to move forward with a frustrating circumstance, and it may be easier to just quit and tell people to go away, but like that affects you you know, for many, many years. And I'd rather, you know, suck it up and do the right thing in every scenario than like take the easy road. That is a pretty intense story. And one that, you know, it's interesting to me how many people that you can see who've gone through stuff and have come out of it, and then you see people who need to go through stuff
Right. No,
to get their heads out of their ass sometimes.
Right.
And
you want to shake them, but you got to let them have their own experience.
right. And it's like, I can just always recognize somebody who appreciates life and views it with gratitude and hard work, and knows what it's like to be at the bottom and knows what it's like to climb out of it. And I bet you are the hardest worker that has ever been on a job site.
Damn straight, woman. Damn straight. I'm
Because
there 10 minutes early. I leave 10 minutes late. I'm always hardworking, but
yeah,
I work with a bunch of guys who are from Guatemala, and a lot of them took coyotes over. The coyotes is another term for somebody who smuggles somebody else in. And these guys are now in their 30s, but they would be smuggled in when they were children. And they haven't seen their families in 20 years, a lot of them. And those men are one of the hardest working groups of people I've ever seen in my life.
yeah.
And they make sure I'm fed during lunch. They like have homemade pupusa or, you know, burritos, or, you know. So one of them made Italian and they made sure I'm fed. And, you know,
That's so cool.
they respect me on a level that most people in Malibu, it took about a year and a half to be taken seriously. I mean, Stefanie, I'll never forget. I got hired by a company, Dowville. I don't care to put them on blast. I will put them on blast fully. They're building Steve Jobs' ex-wife's house, Paradise Cove. And I was going to be hired to do concrete and rebar. And a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful house already poured. And I show up, I'm dressed appropriately, I'm quiet, I'm together, and I make sure to slow the hamster wheel down. Let's not scare people. And the foreman looked at me and said, absolutely not. Absolutely not. You're too much of a distraction on this construction crew. Thank you for your time. But within 2 minutes or 2 seconds, excuse me, of just seeing me, that was his reaction. And I don't know anybody in California. And I'm thinking to myself, don't physically hurt this human being. You do not have anybody to bail you out. And I looked at him. All I could come up with is, I said, if this were Chicago, I would shove rebar so far up your ass. And I walked off. And I called the woman who was so excited to hire me. So excited. She was all about it. It was a woman who was there, you know, on the phone as the assistant for this company. And she was just like, I am so sorry. It's out of my hands. And she was like, but whatever you do, you will flourish. Don't let this stop you for 1 second. And a lot of my girlfriends don't want to touch Southern California. It's competitive. It is like that same song and dance we all talk about. And I am so ready for that day where nobody brings up that I'm a woman.
Yeah.
I'm so ready, because I walk in every day as if I, you know, have the same, you know, I'm the same gender as those men. That's how I walk in. It's like it's out the window. It's not even an issue.
Well, I think it's also like, to me, the other day I had like a new drywall crew on a job, and they had never seen me before. And they, I pull up in my truck and they see me getting out of the truck, and they just like gawk at me, and I want to sock all of them in the face. And one of them is smoking inside my house.
No, a cigarette?
And oh yeah, on the job. And I like inside in this house, like I'm flipping it. So I walk in and I look at it. I go, "I'm Stefanie," and I shake his hand and I go, "Get your ass outside." This is my job, my house. You do not smoke here. And he was like, "Oh my God." But like now to me, it's like there has to be that respect. Like I'm not somebody to look at and to not be taken seriously. And my guys know, I will, like the guys that know me and have worked for me for a long time know, like I will have their back and I will treat them with respect. But when I feel disrespected, you bet your ass I'm not going to stand down. And it's like it had to be established in that moment with that one guy, and then they all were like, "Oh, she knows what she's doing." But like I could have been intimidated and not said anything and made my superintendent deal with it. And there's just those moments that I've learned that sometimes you have to step up and carry some weight to make sure that you are respected. But then like, you guys are doing a good job. I appreciate you. Thank you for being done on time, and make sure you clean your shit up, like to where there's this balance that I kind of feel like I have to carry of being hard, being kind, and being appreciative, and also making sure that they know that I have the knowledge and they're not going to walk all over me. But I didn't.
How many years did it take to learn that?
I think if it were 10 years ago, I never would have said a word. I just wouldn't have said a word, and I probably would have, cowered away into my little hole. But like, I am not terrified of you, and this is my job, and I'm paying you, and like, just like anybody else's job, no other person would want somebody smoking inside their house. Like, you gotta be freaking kidding me. And I'm like, that's just like blatant disrespect to me. And I handled it, I think, how anybody else would have handled it. That just like that's unacceptable. If you want to smoke, go find another job. But I had never met them before, and so now they've met me. But I'm not saying I'm perfect, but I understand it's a delicate balance, and I haven't run into that in a long time. Because where like I needed another crew just with how many people or how many jobs we were juggling, and I needed another crew to be able to get that job and get that schedule done. And so I just haven't felt that way in a long time, because I usually guys.
Well, I look at you, and for those who can't see, Stefanie looks like a Barbie. Gorgeous. But I look at you like you've been that little girl that I've been 10 years ago. That my heart goes out to these girls who want to be in it's typically usually the welding that they all want to be in. And I look at them, and even women who are my age or older are like, "I wish I could do this. I want to do this. I could do this." I'm like, "Get your ass out here. Come on."
Yeah.
But I feel that empathy of like, you have to have a tough skin.
You do, yeah. And I think that's what it is. It's like, you show me respect, like I'll show you respect. And if you're doing something disrespectful, like, come on, let's just let's be kind to each other. And I have such massive respect for the men in the trade who have taught me and have, given me the opportunities and treat me as an equal to them. Like, I could not be more grateful. I have, like the contractor that like in California, you have to have 4 years of experience, and then you have to have like somebody sign off on your work experience. And, just being able to have somebody that lends you that hand. And, it wasn't a woman. There wasn't anybody in front of me to give that to me. And I just hope someday I have the opportunity to do that you know, for another
will.
woman, you know,
You
like
will.
where like there will be more generations that are helping other women get their contractor's license or whatever, you know, or whatever certifications they want to get. I think I encourage more of my guys that like end up being like employees or they have a trade. Like I was just talking to a Finnish carpenter and he's like, I want to get my license. I'm like, this is where you go and this is how you do it. Like those guys that you're talking about from Guatemala, like they're the guys that deserve, you know, to be able to be running that stuff because they have the most experience and the most knowledge. And so I'm always trying to, you know, level up the guys that, you know, so they don't just feel stuck as like the laborer, that they can go and they can achieve something more.
That's
so
huge.
yeah, it is. It's like, let's just help each other. I love it.
Well, California is a whole other crapshoot. I mean,
it is. It's
Chicago,
intense.
you literally just find a way.
I know. I think the first time I found out that like you could just fill out an application to get a license like on the East Coast somewhere, I was like, what? I had to study for like 6 months, 4+ years of work experience. Like it was so hard.
The things in the California test are things that aren't even being used to this day. like certain machines you need to understand aren't really. I'm trying to think of an example.
Well, yeah, and like 99% of what's on the test, like you don't actually use out in the field. Like you can know how to build a house and how to do a remodel and not pass the test.
But then there's like a certain amount of income that you need to be making to afford the, license and bonding of also putting people on payroll, and it's that whole other world. And I'm so proud of you because it's not easy. And just even what payroll happens on Thursday or Wednesday, you have to fill it out every week. And it's like, I watched my boyfriend do it every week with his company, and
it's a lot to juggle for sure.
Right. And I respect my GCs so much too, because California dealing with the permit processes of what goes out there. I mean, it is just, there's a good part to it, meaning a lot of people can't just take this lush land and
do whatever they want to it.
Exactly. The downside is there are people who literally haven't been able to pour foundation in 4 years since that fire because they haven't gotten a permit. And there's 4 inspectors for the entire city.
I know. I've been trying to get test holes dug and inspected for a septic for like 2 weeks. Just we're a little town. I'm like, you know how much it costs to have an excavator sitting out in an orchard to wait for the inspector to dig test holes? Like, come on. Like, you're costing me so much money. Let's go.
And all women should understand what it's like to drive an excavator and use it for demolition. Oh my God.
Right. It's such a cool feeling.
Best feeling in the world.
That's awesome. Well, let me ask you this. What do you think with where you are now? Where do you see yourself in 5 years?
Jeez. Oh, great question. Great question. Because I'm definitely a one day at a time person, but I mean,
that's a beautiful gift that you've taught through AA and getting through the moment and 1 minute at a time, one day at a time, and taking gratitude for each of those things. But maybe it's time you can dream of it.
Exactly. And that's why it's a good question, because this is something that's been weighing on me, and I've been scared to look at of what do I want my future to look like? What is necessary? And I would love to build a school that teaches agriculture, farming, trade work, as all of those things for other kids who are really naughty and have terrible ADD and are just like in homes that are, hyper, I don't what's the word, just not stable,
chaotic.
Chaotic, and or those who just need to be artistic and are good at it and want to learn. I think the more independent I can help my clients become with their own lives, the better we are as a country. I think, can you imagine if all of us had our own farmstead? We all grew chickens. We all had our own, potting soil with our own vegetables and our own herbs, and we all used The water with gray water tanks, where we reused it to water the plants that we're using for our showers, like or solar, whatever. It just like if you could self-sustain your home, because everything is so expensive. It's like I want to be able to help long term, just the country in itself, because I've heard of scary statistics that for every 7 men that leave construction, men or women, only one comes in. So for every 7 men, meaning the library of information that an iron worker has, a library of information a cabinet installer and maker has, out the freaking window. And only
Yeah.
one guy is coming back in.
I had that conversation with my fireplace installer. So I had used this guy for a really long time, just the nicest guy. I loved him. I love him. He's wonderful. And
Right.
I texted him like, hey, I have a fireplace. He's like, I had a stroke. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And then I go to the supplier, you know, and I go, do you have anybody else, you know, that you recommend? Cause like, you know, I've been using this guy for 8 years. Like, I don't know anybody else. And so they send me this other guy and I call him and he's an older guy. And I'm like, I go, what's your plan? Like,
Right.
what is your plan? Because your trade and you know, your trade and your gift and your knowledge,
Yeah.
it cannot be buried and not passed on like that, because he's a creative, like stone guy, you know what I mean? Like he's not just like slap up some stone on the outside of the, you know, bottom half of a house. Like he's an artist. And I'm like, your craft needs to be savored and capsuled and passed on. And he's like, well, I'm teaching my son. And I'm like, okay, good. Because that kind of stuff scares me, that there's the knowledge isn't getting passed on to enough people. Like my guy that, you know, that unfortunately had a stroke. It's like he didn't teach anybody else. And you know, he didn't have anybody else to recommend. And that part, that bothers me, because we're not going to be able to give good quality, beautiful homes with these like ornate details without that 30-40 years of experience, you know, where they know and they've seen and they're, you know, it's not some new person that's never seen anything. And when I meet people like that, I'm like, oh my gosh, tell me everything you know.
Like, I got a dictation machine right here. Go.
Yeah. I'm always asking questions. Like one other example there, I'm doing this like a pickleball court and basketball court for our Durham, like our community park. Like I wanted to do that. And I've never done, you know, like I'm not a fencing contractor and I've never done any like sort of fencing in concrete, but like you know, you hire subs to be able to do this. And this guy, the fencing contractor, he was just so nice. And I'm like, I go, how are you gonna, because my guys, to get the pickleball post in, they like saw cut the concrete, right? And he goes out, and so then you score it and it looks like crap, but we're gonna resurface it. So I wasn't like too worried about it. He goes, well, we just do the core drilling. And I'm like, what's core drill? We just don't do that here. And he's like, well, it's a core driller. It's like a hole saw. And I'm like, you mean like for drywall, but for concrete? And he's like, I'm like, how big of a hole is it? And when are they coming? Like, I want to see it.
I love walking one, and it's, oh my God, the bits that you use are insane.
Yeah, I'm like, I want to see that bit. Like, he's like, oh, it's like a 10-inch hole. And it just like saw cuts down the 4 inches of the slab, and like it's done, bada bing, bada boom, and you know, cost hardly anything to do all there's like 14 holes that had to be saw cut into, you know, for posts for a fence. And I was like, why didn't I think of that?
Right? That's my favorite part, is when somebody else has a mind that's completely differently wired, and they think of something that's so much easier, and I'll think of something that's so much easier, and it just is like,
yeah, there's so many different ways. My coach told me the other day, as many contractors as there are in construction is as many ways as there are to do construction. Like there's not like some contractor, and he was doing this in a way that helps explain it to his clients, that just because we like the way we do it is the way we do it because that's the way we do it, and that's what our knowledge and experience has shown us. And if you take the contractor right next door, he's going to do it different because of his knowledge and experience. And so it keeps the clients from going, well, you know, when George built their house, he framed it this way and, you know, trying to tell you how to do your job. And I was like, oh, genius. Like, you know, as many ways as there are contract, or many ways as there are, however many contractors that are out there is as many ways as you can build it. And I was like, that's such a good thing to tell clients, that there's not one way to do it. And I think that people think that there's only one way.
I think with the inventions of all these new tools, that is one of my favorite parts about construction too. It's like I walk into any Home Depot, any Anawalt, any, you know, like there's this great place called Canal Lumber. It's my favorite lumber yard. They have an insane tool collection. And seeing the ingenuity and the inventions of these tools they come up with, and like, oh, just making your life so much easier.
Right.
Oh, it's my favorite part. I'm like, how do they think of like the magnet on the end of a freaking drill? Genius.
Right, for all of your
genius. Super functional to do, you know, not cost a lot.
Or how about like when they put the light on the drill finally?
Oh,
like,
yeah, right.
You know, I was like, oh.
There's this thing called the Bosch Bulldog. Oh my God. It's this, you know, a hammer drill, but it's got these SES bits that are massive. It will cut any drilling into concrete time or any demolition in half. Like it, oh my God.
Right.
Okay, I gotta ask, what is your company that you like? What is your tool?
What brand do I use? I use Milwaukee. Is that what you use? Yeah, I'm a Milwaukee girl.
I'll go on another cruise site and they're all Makita.
I like when I walk into the aisle down like Home Depot or Lowe's, my kids are like, no, Mom, like, come on. Like I'm like, just like, let me look.
And then I realized I was looking at my wall and I'm like, oh shit.
Yeah, I know. We'll get you later.
What the girl can dream.
I know, right? Oh, that's so awesome. Okay, well, tell people where they can find you. I know you have a wonderful following on Instagram, so share your Instagram handle, and if they want to hire you, share all your things.
So I'm at Bad Bitch Builders on Instagram, and I'm at badbitchbuilders.com. God, my family has had so many issues with the name, but I'm like, you know what? It's good bitch energy. Bitch energy is like you're a mama bear and you see your cub about to be hurt and you just fucking go ham. You know? Right?
Oh my gosh, my coach had another good statement the other day, and he was like, we were talking about passing on the like pre-construction to the construction crew, right? And I'm involved in the pre-construction and I do the scope of work, and then like my project manager takes over like to execute. And he said to me two things. One was, she needs to make sure she's the HMFIC. And I was like, what? What's that? And he was like, head mother in charge. And I was like, yes. Because it was like about some produce. Yeah. HMFIC. I was like, all right, she needs to take that attitude and carry it on, because he was talking about a producer at like I can't remember who it was, but like on a movie set, and the back of his chair said HMFIC, and like I was like, what does that mean? And he goes, that's the attitude that your project manager needs to have, that like no matter what, she's in charge. And she goes, and then the other thing he said was she also needs to be like Will Smith, like don't you ever, what did he say when he was on stage? He was like, I don't ever want to hear my wife's effing name out of your mouth. And like the purpose is like I never have your project manager say your contractor's name. So like, oh, I don't know, I'm gonna go check with Stefanie. Like that is the worst thing you could say, because it minimizes your authority, right? And then your client's always just going to be calling Stefanie now, because project manager isn't quite sure what to do. So it's always like, no problem, I'll find out for you, but don't you ever say my name, you know? I was like, that's such good advice. Just to like.
The best advice I ever heard was act as if you are on camera every second of the day.
Yeah.
You are being watched, you know, and it's not like I'm, you know,
doing not like a creepy thing, but yeah,
right,
it's just like.
But you're being watched, and how you clean up your station, how you talk to the guys, how you're dressed, whatever it is, it's you're being watched, and that I kept with me always, of just like how I conduct myself. Not that, you know, I would do anything super
and not in a fake way, but that you just like be mindful of who you are and how you show up. And I think that's so important. Absolutely. Well, gosh, darling Coleen, it has been amazing to get to know you and the incredible stuff that you're doing. And I wish you well. And I am so proud of your journey of sobriety. I know that that is not an easy one. And I have a lot of, you know, family and friends who are, you know, on that boat as well. And it is a beautiful thing to see, when people can overcome things and choose to have their life be what they want it to be and not have everything just happen to them. And you have gone after your dreams and you took a chance, and I know you will be where you want to be when, you know, in the future. And it's just been a pleasure to meet you.
You too. I feel that same sentiment, and I'm so grateful that while everybody went this way, you and I and all these other women went that way.
Yeah.
Thank fucking God.
That's right. Bad bitches. All right. Well, you have a good day, okay?
Okay. Bye, honey.
Bye.
Thanks for joining me today on the She Build Show. My name is Stefanie Olson. My hope is that this episode leaves you feeling empowered and ready to boldly take that step into building the life that you envision, 1 2x4 at a time. And if you can do me a quick favor, please leave me a 5-star review on iTunes. I get giddy over reading the reviews each week, and I will choose one special person to win some She Build swag. Make sure you add your name to the review, and I'll reach out if you're the winner. Thanks again for hanging out. Be sure to visit me at theshebuildshow.com, where you can ask me questions and share with me what you're building.